ranking wide receivers for dynasty purposes is a lot different than ranking wide receivers on a week-to-week basis. For example, factors such as age and quarterback situation, they play a lot more into the heavy weighting factors of rankings. So we're going through our top 30 dynasty receivers today, and you can expect to see their age as they head into the next season. So getting into our first tier, I still consider Ja'Marr Chase number one, but JSN has now entered into that top tier with Ja'Marr Chase. So Ja'Marr Chase, I think to me, the key that's holding all this together is Joe Burrow. And I expect Joe Burrow to return to the Cincinnati Bengals. There's just no indication for me that he will not be there. And I think Ja'Marr Chase is still at that age where I can still trust him to have several more years of primetime dominance that he is capable of putting up. Jackson Smith-Njigba, everything changed this year. And this is a guy I was really happy to see succeed because I was very big on JSN from the get-go. I at one time called him the best wide receiver prospect I had seen since Ja'Marr Chase coming out of college, and he proved that this year. Now, he exceeded my expectations personally, but there's so many good things. Number one, JSN is going to be really young heading into next year again. Number two, this quarterback situation is what it is. Sam Darnold is their guy, and it works for fantasy purposes. So as far as I'm concerned, JSN is right there with Ja'Marr Chase in tier one. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we've got Malik Nabers at number 3 and Puka Nacua at number 4 to round out this exclusive tier. Now, the reason I still prefer someone like Malik Nabers over someone who was dominant this year like Puka is because if you actually look at the Giants situation, that is not a bad situation. Yes, from a coaching perspective, from an ownership perspective, they are a complete and utter disaster. But if you look at this team from a quarterback perspective, Jackson Dart is going to be their future, and Malik Nabers is part of that. And Malik Nabers is very young. So as far as the injury he just had, if he had PCL damage, if they had to, address several different ligament tears, I'd feel a little differently, but this was a clean ACL tear. That is usually not the worst thing for a young player as much as they've evolved that surgery. I don't worry about Malik Nabers coming back and being the player he once was with a pure ACL tear. I love Malik Nabers still in Dynasty, and he's actually a great buy low in my opinion right now. Puka Nacua at 4. Here's the deal with Puka. I am actually considering selling him high after this year, and I get it was dominant. And I think Puka is a dominant player. There's a couple problems here, though. Number one is Matt Stafford at any point could retire. Like, this is a guy who is entering his 40s, and yes, he looks fantastic, but if that offensive line gives up a bad sack to him, he could really injure himself even further to the point where he says, you know what? I've taken so many hits. Why do I keep doing this? Number 2 is Puka Nacua, and I don't want to get into this like off the field stuff with the streamers and all that, but that was a factor. I read reports that the Los Angeles Rams were pissed after that, and they basically said, you better get your act together or we're going to send you packing. Now, he's so good, I kind of see that to be hard to believe, but I think there's a lot of issues here that could come up, so I had to mitigate that risk a little bit by putting him at 4, but also acknowledging that he's still in a tier on his own. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we've got Amon-Ra St. Brown at 5 and CeeDee Lamb at number 6. So these two guys, they're kind of exiting, I would say, the prime of their career. Not to say that they had any sort of pullback from play this year that would indicate that they're about to take a step back. I just think when you look at the age of both of these guys, they're both tremendous players in very good and stable situations. That's why they're at the top of this tier. But as far as putting them in tier 2, I think they've both kind of exited that tier because they're on the back end of their prime. Usually you want to sell off wide receivers at the age of 27 or 28 years old to really maximize return. I would start considering selling these guys off while also saying, if you give me too little, I'm not giving you these guys because I know I'm going to get another dominant 2 years at least of both of these guys. Justin Jefferson at number 7. Listen, guys, this is just a more in-depth conversation. On my main channel, Fantasy Football Roundup, I went through all season, even before the season started, and basically said, I just don't like Justin Jefferson that much this year. And it has nothing to do with the talent. He's at 7 because of talent. But there's a couple big problems here. Number 1, quarterback situation for wide receivers in Dynasty, it cannot be overstated. It just cannot be. This guy is going to continue to have this quarterback carousel, because if you think that they're sticking with J.J. McCarthy, you're kidding yourself. They're going to be looking for other options, and at that point, I just have to worry about it, because Justin Jefferson is entering 27 years old as of this next season. I wonder about what's left of his prime combined with the quarterback dysfunction. If he had someone like Jared Goff, I would be fully on board to put him at the top of this tier. But we're at this point right now where we have no idea what the future holds for the next year, maybe 2, maybe 3 years. And I do not trust this situation for Justin Jefferson to give more than he's already given you. I worry that he's hit his peak already. Drake London at number 8 and George Pickens is at number 9. So Drake London, this guy from a talent perspective and from an age perspective, he should be higher on this list. Like if he had a much more stable quarterback situation, I would potentially consider putting him in tier 2. But obviously, the Falcons are a mess. They just fired their head coach, Raheem Morris. They just fired their GM, and we have no idea what the quarterback future holds for them. Kirk Cousins isn't that good, and Michael Penix has obviously been banged up his whole career. So I just have a lot of issues with the Atlanta Falcons as a whole and their passing game situation as a whole. But Drake London, from a talent perspective, that's not the problem. The problem is quarterback and just their whole team as a whole. It's really bad, and it's just kind of a bad place for him to be at. George Pickens at 9. This year changed everything for him. I mean, he wasn't even in my top 30 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously goes to Dallas, has a much better season with Dak, a much better quarterback than the Steelers have been playing with. And playing alongside CD, I think was huge. In my opinion, he's better for his dynasty value to stick in Dallas. I don't know if that's going to happen. I kind of believe that they're going to stick with him, but it wouldn't surprise me if they let him walk. And I think he's worse off for it. Either way, though, I think what we saw this year was real with George Pickens. So if he goes and is someone else's wide receiver 1, I'd still bet on him in the long run because of the age that George Pickens is at. And I think that he has another several years of prime George Pickens left. Nico Collins is at 10. I love Nico. He's great. I traded him away in Dynasty. Wish I didn't do it because the guy is awesome. One of the things I loved about Nico when I traded for him was the fact that he has CJ Stroud. And you could say CJ's not that good of a quarterback. The bottom line is that's a stable situation. That's their quarterback of the future. You know that CJ is not going anywhere. So I love that from a stability perspective. However, Nico is getting to that age where it's like, should we be looking to trade him? Like, it does kind of feel like a maybe maximize the offseason type of situation with Nico Collins coming off another great year. Nico kind of is what he is. He's never going to be a 1,600 to 1,500 yard receiving guy. Most of the times, he'll give you around 1,100 to 1,200 because he'll miss some time with injury or he'll just be phased out of a game plan, which I think is great. I think he's a tremendous player when he's on, but it's not always that you're getting that elite dominant performance. So if he was a little younger, he'd be higher on this list, but considering his age, I'm comfortable keeping him here. And these are just the top 30 we're going through today, guys. If you want access to my top 100 Dynasty wide receiver rankings, you can do that with a premium subscription at our site, fsroundup.com. In addition to that, you'll also get access to the comparison feature, which we are now syncing up for Dynasty purposes. We are working on a keep trade cut tool on the site as well, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But there's a lot of great features deep into the offseason, especially for the diehard Dynasty guys like me. Dropping down to our next tier, T. Higgins is at 11 and Garrett Wilson is at 12. So here's my thing with T. Again, quarterback situation is weighted heavily in my Dynasty rankings. As long as Burrow is there, we know that that's an elite quarterback situation. T. Higgins is also not much older than Garrett Wilson. T. Higgins is a guy that I view as still going to be in his prime for the next 2 to 3 years potentially. Because the good thing about him is he's not the wide receiver 1. He doesn't handle 150, 160 targets a year, putting a lot of tread on his tires. T. Higgins being behind Jamar is the perfect scenario for him. Now that he's locked up, I think that this is a great situation that I would just rather have over Garrett Wilson. From a talent perspective, this guy should be in tier 2 or tier 3. Nobody's arguing that. But from the perspective of complete disaster, like I was talking about Drake London and his problems at quarterback, I mean, it doesn't even hold a candle to the problems that Garrett Wilson has. It just doesn't. Garrett Wilson is in the worst position from a team perspective, from a quarterback perspective. Garrett Wilson is the all-star on the worst team in football. I mean, it doesn't get much worse. I worry about him from a quarterback perspective. There's never going to be consistency, but of course he's going to be a guy for the next 4 years who's going to give you massive performances when he really has no business doing it, which is why he ultimately rises above where he ultimately should be at number 12. Rashee Rice at 13 and Rome Odunze is at 14. So Rashee Rice, I think a lot of people will look at this with Mahomes and think the sky is falling. I think we'll be fine. Mahomes can still sling it. Like, I do not think it's going to be a problem for Mahomes when he does return. Rashee Rice, the problem with him, and that he's not ultimately higher, is because of his age. He came in as an older rookie, so he's going to be 26 heading into this new season. Like, that's not the best for a player who already had a knee injury. He had, he's just not like the biggest downfield threat. He's a great receiver for fantasy football purposes when he's healthy, but he does have some limitations. And I do think that with the age factor, you kind of have to rank him a little bit lower. Then I would be more inclined to rank him if he was a 23 or 24-year-old receiver. Rome Odunze at 14, and I'm big on the Chicago wide receiver group. Like, I think that this offense is awesome with Ben Johnson. He totally changed everything. Not just the offense, he changed the culture over there. Caleb looks the best he's looked as not just a pro. He's looked the best he's looked since USC days. I mean, I love what Caleb and Rome were building up until the point that Rome kind of was dealing with injuries the last 2 months. Rome Odunze, I kind of look at this year as not a wash, because he definitely rose up my rankings, but I'm willing to overlook the last 2 months of Rome's fantasy season that we just saw, because I see the potential here as being really high with Caleb. And Ted McMillan, I love Ted McMillan and what he was able to overcome in Carolina this year. He definitely blew by my expectations of him from a dynasty perspective. Last offseason wasn't the biggest. Bryce Young, I do think that there's potential that they move off of him. I don't think he's their quarterback of the future necessarily, but it also wouldn't shock me if he is. So if he is, Ted is just still limited, and I do kind of feel like if they move off of him, it's not the guarantee that they're going to get the right guy immediately. So I think Ted McMillan is best served as a wide receiver 2 in Dynasty right now with definite potential to move up. Dropping down to our next tier, Emeka Egbuka is at 16, and Ladd McConkey is at 17. So Egbuka is really hard, because if you look at this season, it was completely a tale of two different halves. Like, Emeka Egbuka was dominant in the first half of the season. Then he gets injured. They start getting Mike Evans back. They start getting Chris Godwin back. Then obviously late they get Jalen McMillan back. And he loses favor to the point of irrelevancy those last several weeks. So I think Emeka Egbuka is best served as Tampa's wide receiver 2. I think that maximizes his dynasty/fantasy potential. However, I do still think he is the best Tampa wide receiver moving forward. Chris Godwin, not the same player. Mike Evans, not the same player. They probably move on from one, at least one, possibly both this offseason. So I do think you still have to look at this, say Baker's their long-term quarterback, and I do think that the talent is still there. And I do think you can't rank him much lower than this just because of how bad of a taste he left in people's mouths at the end of the season. Ladd McConkey at 17. I think Ladd, I think of him very similarly to the way I looked at him last year, which is great player. I really like him. He's very important to the Chargers offense. I still do think he's not their long-term number one. Just a gut feeling. I think he will remain very important. I think if he's not their number one, it's like a T. Higgins, George Pickens, Jameson Williams situation where it's like he's not a distant wide receiver 2. Like, he is going to maintain a very involved role whatever they do at the wide receiver position. But I do think that this offense still is missing something, and they will continue to try to find it. So I do think Ladd is going to be in position to where he probably won't hit on a lot of people's expectations for him. I probably have him ranked lower than a lot of people do, just because I think the Chargers offense is missing something, and I think they know it, and they're trying to find it. Chris Olave is at 18, and A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are at 19 and 20 to round us out in this tier. So Chris Olave, I fully expect to be ranking him well below consensus. I love what he did this year. I have never been the biggest Chris Olave guy, just to be completely transparent. I always thought he was a little overrated. I liked the talent, but I didn't always love the effort. This year was a massive wake-up call for me. Like, he's a very good player. However, one thing that really bothers me with him, I actually like the quarterback situation. I think Tyler Shough, if they stick with him, I think that's fine. The problem ultimately is, though, he was talking in a press conference a couple weeks ago about how he seriously considered retirement because this guy has had a lot of concussions and a lot of injuries. That doesn't just go away. It doesn't just go away. I do think of him as a guy that I worry about more from an injury perspective than anything else. And obviously, if he doesn't get injured, this is too low of a ranking, and I can acknowledge that. But as we sit here today, I do worry about that with Chris Olave. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, I still view these guys as back-to-back in basically every situation because A.J.'s the better player. Right? He's the more dominant player. He can take over games more. But he is older, right? He's going to be 29 heading into the season. And I don't know if he's going to be destined to return to Philly. I really do think there's a good possibility that Philly trades him in the offseason. And that could be better for him, honestly. And it would definitely be better for Devonta Smith because I think Devonta Smith is a guy that could be Philly's wide receiver one. Jalen Hurts is a guy that's not exactly the best spread it around and get 4,000 yards passing on a yearly basis type of guy. He's just not that guy. So I actually think they both benefit if AJ left and Devonta was there by himself. But as we sit here today, I still do view them as back-to-back because I do think Devonta Smith is a guy I'd want to invest in from a dynasty perspective because of age and because of the potential AJ leaves. But also, AJ is still a great player. So if he goes somewhere else, I could still see another dominant couple seasons. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we've got Jameson Williams at 21 and Travis Hunter at 22. And I'll be honest here, this tier is a little weird. Like, Jameson Williams is a guy that I could actually hear the argument that he could be higher. Like, honestly, Jameson Williams, I might be under ranking because this guy is very young. He's very young, number one. Number two, they got him locked up long term. Number three, their quarterback situation is set in stone. So I do think that every angle you look at this, it's like, where's the problem? Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown being there makes him the wide receiver too. And he's not consistent enough to be considered like an emerging wide receiver one. He's best as a wide receiver two and a very high-end one at that. And I do think the way that Dan Campbell likes to use him, I think will translate to whoever their next offensive coordinator is. So I do think Jameson Williams, I could be underranking him. The reason I put him here is because he's not consistent enough to be a wide receiver one, even in the scenario that Amon-Ra St. Brown would leave. And by the way, that's not going to happen. Travis Hunter at 22, BTJ at 23. These rankings are very fluid. I mean, these are just placeholders for two talents that I think are pretty great. Like, this Jacksonville offense, I think is going to see, it's going to be very interesting to follow throughout the playoffs, obviously, and in the offseason. Like, Travis Hunter, to me, is the guy that will be there in Jacksonville before BTJ will next year. Now, the problem with Hunter, obviously, is if they continue to try to utilize him as a two-way player, it's never going to work for dynasty purposes as a wide receiver. It will never work. They have to make the commitment to make him a wide receiver. I believe they ultimately will because I think he's better there, and I think he would acknowledge it too. I'm hoping they do that, but again, if they don't do that, then this ranking is way too high. With BTJ, man, I don't think he's long for Jacksonville. I think this whole season was proof of the offseason when people were like, why would you draft Travis Hunter, who's basically a similar receiver to BTJ? I think that was proof that the offensive coaching staff didn't really love BTJ. I think he's long for somebody else, and I think that's better for him. I'm really rooting for a BTJ trade, but again, as of right now, these could be two wildly off-base rankings right here. I just am going to keep them here because I want to invest in both of those talents. Luther Burden is at 24, and Terry McLaurin is at 25. Luther Burden, I love Luther Burden. This guy, he hits a lot of metrics I like. Like his route running is excellent. They use him all over the field in Chicago. Just watch the way they utilize him. He is really evolving into their do-it-all receiver. At the middle of the field, he's open. He gets open on either hash mark. He gets open short. He gets open deep. This is their guy that they really want to make a bona fide wide receiver 1 or even like a high-end wide receiver 2. I prefer Rome because I think he's a higher upside talent for dynasty purposes. But Luther Burden, man, and this offense in Chicago, I want to invest. And I want to invest big in Luther Burden. I think he's a great buy low trade target this offseason. Terry McLaurin at 25. Listen, man, I rank him above other older wide receiver ones like Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers, maybe you could throw in there, Michael Pittman Jr., DK Metcalf, because the chemistry with him and Jaden Daniels is there. And Terry still is a big play type of player, even at his age. So I do think it's worth noting, you don't know how many more good seasons you're getting out of Terry. Like you could get 1 or 2, maybe 3, but you probably won't get more than 3. 3 is probably even pushing it. I do think Terry for the next couple of years is going to be a player that still is a good dynasty asset, but definitely not for long. He definitely has trade value right now still, but you might want to maximize it this offseason. Jalen Waddle at 26. I really wanted to put him higher. I was big into him before the start of 2025, and I was right because Jalen Waddle was the better wide receiver between him and Tyreek. Obviously, Tyreek gets injured, yada, yada, yada. But the reason I liked him was because I saw something with Jalen Waddle that we saw back in his rookie season, which is he can be a target-dominant guy. Now, this whole thing has been blown up. I mean, Tua is not going to be their quarterback. So it's like, are they going to try Quinn Ewers? Are they going to try to trade for someone? Are they going to try to pick up someone on free agency? I don't know what they're doing, but it definitely screws with the timeline of Jalen Waddle for dynasty purposes. So I've got to have him down here a little lower. Dropping down to our last tier, Zay Flowers at 27, and Xavier Worthy is sticking around in the top 30. So Zay Flowers for me, I think of him as the guy that kind of is what he is. And it's disappointing because I was really looking forward to like a breakout season for him this year. I think he's a really good player, but I do think the Baltimore Ravens just are going to use him like they use him. And I don't think that's evolving. I really was hoping it would. I did not see that this year. And ultimately, I just think that Lamar Jackson, I don't buy into this whole, the Ravens are going to trade Lamar. They'll fire Harbaugh before they trade Lamar Jackson. That's not happening. But the way I see it is like Lamar has just never been a guy that's fed a dominant wide receiver 1 in fantasy. And as long as he's in Baltimore, that will be Zay's story. Xavier Worthy at 28. Here's my thing with Xavier Worthy. I think a lot of people are going to be fading him this offseason, and I understand it because when he played a lot of the season, and he wasn't very good. However, keep things into context. Week 1, he gets hit by a guy who clears him by 120 pounds, Travis Kelce. His shoulder never really is the same. Then he gets an ankle injury, and he's never the same after that either. I consider this year to be a wash. And I consider it to be an injury-prone year for a player that ultimately I think still does have a lot of talent and upside. Like, he's a young guy. He still has Mahomes. He's still under a rookie contract. I really do think that I'm giving him a pass this year, and I might try to buy him low in Dynasty this year. I don't think he's that great of a player as far as, the capability of being a wide receiver 1 on any team. I don't think he has that, but I do think as far as being a Jameson Williams type of wide receiver 2, I think he's got that upside. Jaden Reed is at 29, and Marvin is at 30. Jaden Reed, to me, I don't think the Packers are letting him go. I just don't see the Packers letting him go. He is their best wide receiver, and I do think that ultimately Green Bay is a place I want to be attached to from a dynasty perspective with a wide receiver. Jordan Love, I've always had a thing for him. I think he's a very good player, and I do think Jaden Reed, at his best, is a very good player as well for fantasy purposes. So I think of this year, again, kind of as a wash a little bit because he is a guy that I do ultimately believe has higher upside than what we saw this year because all you have to do is go back and look at his history. Marvin Harrison Jr., man, I would trade him. I mean, at this point, guys, he is what he is. He's not an alpha. He's a beta. Like, he is a beta that is a massive disappointment to me because of his dad being a Hall of Fame receiver. He just is not the same. They're not the same. So I think of Marvin as a guy that is going to get people excited to get in Dynasty because he's still young. He still has the talent, but I don't think anyone's ever going to be satisfied with him. So if it was me and I had him, I'd be trying to trade him away this offseason based on the promise because he still has enough talent to be in the top 30. When you factor in the quarterback situation changing in Arizona, how big of a mess that operation is, I would just say it's better off trading him. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below, and make sure to stay tuned for the running back rankings update for Dynasty.